The most devastating power shift in women's basketball history just happened, and most people don't even realize it yet. While WNBA veterans sit frozen in a bitter labor dispute that could cancel their entire season, Caitlyn Clark just walked into Madison Square Garden, sat courtside with basketball royalty, and became the face of basketball on NBC. Not women's basketball, basketball. 4.5 million people watched her analyze an NBA game on national television. That's more viewers than most WNBA finals games have ever seen. And here's the part that should terrify every veteran who spent 2 years trying to dim her light. NBC just confirmed she's coming back. March 29th, more appearances throughout the season. She's not a one-time guest. She's part of the family now. The same veterans who froze her out of the Olympics, who threw cheap shots on the court, who went on podcasts to diminish her accomplishments, are now watching her transcend their entire league. And the brutal irony? They created this monster themselves. NBC didn't just hire Caitlyn Clark for a feel-good story. This was a calculated business decision that signals where the future of women's basketball is heading. And that future doesn't require the cooperation of bitter gatekeepers who spent years complaining about new fans instead of welcoming them. Let's break down exactly what NBC did here, because the implications are staggering. They brought Clark onto Basketball Night in America as a special contributor, not a WNBA analyst, a basketball analyst. She sat between Vince Carter and Carmelo Anthony at Madison Square Garden for a Lakers versus Knicks game, legends of the sport treating her like an equal. Reggie Miller was there. These are Hall of Famers, and they're sharing the desk with a 23-year-old who just finished her rookie WNBA season. NBC's president of programming was asked about future appearances, and he didn't hesitate. He said they're absolutely planning more. He called her a natural. He talked about how she brings something special to the broadcast. This isn't charity. This isn't a diversity hire. This is NBC recognizing that Caitlyn Clark drives eyeballs, drives engagement, drives subscriptions. The numbers don't lie. That Lakers-Knicks broadcast pulled 4.5 million viewers. It was the most-watched regular-season NBA game on NBC in over a decade that wasn't a Christmas Day matchup or season opener. People tuned in specifically to see her. And here's where it gets even more strategic. Clark is already part of the Comcast family. She's got an Xfinity endorsement deal. NBC is owned by Comcast. This isn't just a one-off collaboration. This is corporate synergy at the highest level. They're building an entire ecosystem around one player, one brand, one draw. While the WNBA veterans are stuck arguing over revenue percentages in a conference room somewhere, Caitlyn Clark is becoming a multimedia empire. She's on your TV analyzing NBA games. She's in commercials during those same games. She's on social media breaking down highlights. She's everywhere. And she doesn't need the WNBA season to start to make any of this happen. That's the nuclear option NBC just activated. They've created a Caitlyn Clark business model that operates completely independently of whether the WNBA plays a single game this year. But that wasn't the whole story. Because while Clark is sitting courtside in New York living her best life, the WNBA is imploding behind closed doors. The collective bargaining agreement expired on January 9th. That's over a month ago now, and the two sides aren't just far apart, they're in completely different universes. The Players Union authorized a strike back in December. Think about that timeline. They gave themselves the nuclear option before negotiations even got serious. The veterans are demanding 30% of gross revenue. Gross. That means 30 cents of every dollar that comes into the league before any expenses are paid. The owners looked at that proposal and basically laughed. Their counteroffer? 70% of net revenue, which sounds generous until you realize net revenue is what's left after you pay for everything. Travel, facilities, salaries for coaches and staff, marketing, production costs. The gap between those two positions is astronomical. And here's the kicker. The season is supposed to start May 8th. The expansion draft needs to happen. Free agency needs to open. The rookie draft needs to be scheduled. None of that can happen without a new CBA.
Over 100 veterans are free agents right now. They can't sign with teams, they can't negotiate contracts, they're just sitting at home waiting for a deal that might never come. The tension is getting ugly too. Reports are surfacing that there's infighting within the union itself. Maximum salary players want different things than minimum salary players. Stars who already have endorsement deals aren't feeling the same pressure as role players who need every dollar from their WNBA contract. The union president keeps saying they're confident. She keeps saying they'll get a fair deal. But behind the scenes, sources say both sides are dug in. Neither wants to blink first. And every day that passes without a resolution is another day that Caitlyn Clark builds her brand outside the WNBA ecosystem, while veterans watch their leverage evaporate. Now, let's talk about why Caitlyn Clark has all the power in this situation. And I mean all of it, because the numbers that she put up in her first year as a professional changed everything about how this league operates. Forbes documented something they called the Caitlyn Clark effect. The Wall Street Journal wrote multiple features on it. This isn't speculation, this is verified economic impact. When she played in the NCAA championship game in April 2024, 18.9 million people watched. That's the most watched basketball game, college or professional, men's or women's, in over a decade. The WNBA draft, where she was selected, 2.45 million viewers. That shattered every previous draft record by orders of magnitude. When she made her professional debut, stadiums sold out in minutes, not hours, minutes. Arenas that normally had a few thousand fans were suddenly packing 20,000 people. And this wasn't just an Indiana Fever phenomenon. When the Fever played road games, opposing teams sold out their buildings too. Fans were buying tickets just to see her play, regardless of what jersey she was wearing.
But here's where it gets really interesting for the CBA negotiations. When Clark missed games due to injury or rest during the 2025 season, viewership dropped between 30 and 40%, not just for Fever games, league-wide. People were tuning in specifically to watch her, and when she wasn't playing, they changed the channel. The Indiana Fever's franchise valuation jumped to an estimated $370 million. For context, that franchise was valued at around $50 million just 2 years earlier. That's a 600% increase. League-wide revenue reportedly crossed $875 million last year. Multiple analysts have attributed the majority of that growth directly to Clark's drawing power. Sponsorship deals flooded in. Nike, State Farm, Gatorade, companies that barely acknowledged the WNBA before were suddenly fighting over commercial spots during games. And here's the brutal truth that veterans don't want to acknowledge. Without Caitlyn Clark, none of that money exists. The league was operating at a financial loss for decades. The NBA was subsidizing operations. And then one player from Iowa showed up, and suddenly there's actual revenue to negotiate over. So when veterans demand a 30% share of gross revenue, the owners are doing the math. They're looking at the data. They're seeing that one player is responsible for the vast majority of new income, and they're asking a very reasonable question. Why should we pay everyone equally when the value isn't distributed equally? It's a harsh economic reality, but it's reality nonetheless. Clark's rookie contract pays her $78,000 this season. Her total 4-year deal is worth $338,000. That's less than most NBA players make in a single game. But here's the thing, she doesn't need that WNBA salary. Her endorsement deals are estimated at over $8 million annually. Her Nike contract alone is reportedly worth $28 million over 8 years. She's making generational wealth off the court. The WNBA paycheck is basically a rounding error for her at this point. She plays because she loves the game, not because she needs the money. The veterans, meanwhile, are demanding the salary cap increase from $1.5 million to over $10 million. They want maximum individual salaries around $1.3 million per year. The league's latest proposal includes a cap of $5.65 million, with max salaries still well below $1 million. The gap is massive, and the math simply doesn't work without Caitlyn Clark continuing to drive unprecedented growth. Which brings us to the existential question. What happens if she decides she doesn't need the WNBA anymore? What happens if she looks at the toxicity, the cheap shots, the constant criticism, the Olympic snub, and says, "You know what? I'm good. I've got NBC, I've got endorsements, I've got Team USA opportunities. I don't need to deal with this anymore." The entire economic foundation of these salary demands collapses immediately. And what happened next would shock everyone, because the 2024 Olympic situation is still one of the most controversial decisions in women's basketball history. Caitlyn Clark had just finished the greatest individual season in college basketball history. She broke Pete Maravich's all-time scoring record. She led Iowa to back-to-back national championship games. She was the most popular player in the sport by a mile, and the selection committee left her off the roster. They took Chelsea Gray instead, who was injured, couldn't even play in several games. The committee claimed they were selecting based on experience and chemistry, but everyone knew what it really was. It was the old guard circling the wagons. It was the old guard refusing to let the new star take what they saw as their spotlight. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Fans were outraged. Mainstream media couldn't understand the decision. Even people who didn't follow basketball closely were asking how you leave the most popular player off the team. But the committee stood firm, and Clark handled it with incredible grace. She said all the right things. She supported the team publicly. She cheered them on during the Olympics. She took the high road. But here's what nobody talks about. That decision might have been the best thing that ever happened to her, career-wise. Because while the Olympic team was in Paris playing to modest viewership numbers, Clark was resting, recovering, preparing for her rookie WNBA season without the physical toll of an international tournament. And now, she's back on the Team USA roster for the World Cup qualifying in March 2026. She's going to represent her country on the international stage anyway, but this time, she's coming in with an entire year of professional experience. She's coming in as an established star. She's coming in with leverage. The Olympic snub was supposed to humble her, supposed to put her in her place, supposed to remind her that she needed to wait her turn and respect the hierarchy. Instead, it freed her from obligation. It showed her that the system wasn't designed to reward excellence. It was designed to protect seniority. And that lesson is serving her incredibly well right now, as she watches that same system try to bully the owners into paying for value that doesn't exist without her. NBC's strategy here is absolutely ruthless, and it's brilliant. They're not calling Diana Taurasi for interviews. They're not booking Brianna Stewart for special segments. They're not reaching out to Nneka Agwumike to discuss the labor negotiations. They're not interested in the voices that spent the last 2 years complaining about new fans ruining the culture. NBC wants stars who make their product more valuable, not people who make audiences feel bad for watching. And Caitlyn Clark is the ultimate modern sports star. She's positive, she's humble, she's incredibly skilled. She connects with fans authentically. She doesn't lecture people about what they should care about. She just plays basketball at an elite level and lets her game speak. That's marketable. That's what brands want to align with. That's what drives subscriptions to Peacock and ratings on NBC. The veterans who spent 2 years throwing shade made themselves unmarketable in the process. Networks avoid controversy. They avoid negativity. They avoid anything that makes casual fans uncomfortable. The bitter gatekeeping, the complaints about charter flights while insulting the people who pay to watch, the podcast tours where they diminished Clark's achievements, all of that made them toxic from a corporate perspective.
So NBC made the easiest decision in television history. They built their promotional strategy around the one person who actually moves the needle. Look at their marketing materials for WNBA coverage. It's not a league promotion, it's a Caitlyn Clark promotion that happens to include other players in the background. She's front and center. She's the face. Everyone else is supporting cast. And that's a direct consequence of how the veterans chose to behave. They could have been standing next to her. They could have been part of this rising tide, but they chose resentment over opportunity. They chose to protect their small pond instead of swimming in the ocean Clark was creating for everyone. And now they're watching her get everything they wanted while they're stuck in a labor dispute with no end in sight. The leverage situation is even more one-sided than it appears on the surface. Think about what happens if the veterans actually strike, if they refuse to play and cancel the season. What happens to Caitlyn Clark? She shows up at Madison Square Garden every Sunday night during the rest of the NBA season. She sits with Hall of Famers. She breaks down games for 4 to 5 million viewers. She builds her personal brand to unprecedented levels. She gets paid by NBC regardless of whether a single WNBA game is played. She continues her Xfinity commercials. She continues her Nike promotions. She continues her State Farm appearances. Her life doesn't change at all. In fact, it might actually get better because she gets a full off-season to rest her body, work on her game, and prepare for international competition without the wear and tear of a WNBA schedule. Now think about what happens to the veterans if they strike. They sit at home. No games, no platform, no visibility, no paychecks, no way to build their brands or stay relevant. The casual fans who started watching because of Clark, they're not going to wait around for a labor dispute to resolve. They'll move on to other sports, other entertainment. And when the strike eventually ends, those fans might not come back. The veterans thought they were playing a game of chicken with the league. They thought the owners needed them badly enough to cave on financial demands, but they miscalculated catastrophically because the owners have a contingency plan now, and that contingency plan is the Caitlyn Clark business model. NBC has essentially shown the WNBA ownership that you can generate massive revenue and engagement with basketball content featuring Clark without needing the full league infrastructure. You don't need 12 teams, you don't need a complex schedule, you don't need 144 roster spots filled with players who actively alienate your audience. You just need the one person everyone actually wants to watch, and she's already under contract with NBC in a role that doesn't require union approval or CBA negotiations. The owners are looking at this and realizing they have way more leverage than they thought. They can wait out the strike. They can let the veterans sit at home all summer. And meanwhile, their most valuable asset is building the audience even larger on national television. When the strike eventually ends and everyone comes back to the table, that audience will already be trained to think of Caitlyn Clark as transcending the WNBA entirely. She'll be the basketball star who occasionally plays in a women's league, not a WNBA player who occasionally appears on other platforms. This is a masterclass in business strategy that will be studied for decades. The WNBA veterans literally had a golden opportunity dropped in their laps, a generational talent who could have lifted everyone's profile, everyone's earning potential, everyone's long-term career prospects. All they had to do was welcome her. All they had to do was say, "This is amazing. Let's build something incredible together. Let's use her popularity to grow the entire league." Instead, they chose jealousy. They chose to physically intimidate her on the court. They chose to diminish her accomplishments in media appearances. They chose to freeze her out of opportunities like the Olympics. They chose to create a toxic environment that made casual fans feel unwelcome. And now they're experiencing the consequences of those choices in the most brutal way possible. NBC has moved on without them. The owners have found a path forward that doesn't require their cooperation. The fans have chosen sides, and it's not the side that spent 2 years being negative and bitter. The entire power structure has flipped, and corporate America has spoken with absolute clarity. Character matters, professionalism matters, being good for business matters. Caitlyn Clark never said a bad word about anyone. She never engaged in the drama publicly. She never fired back on social media when veterans were taking shots at her. She just showed up every single night and played elite basketball. She signed autographs for hours after games. She did every media obligation with grace. She thanked fans for coming, even when some of those fans were cheering against her. She respected the history of the game, even when that history didn't respect her back. She took the high road so consistently, so relentlessly, that it made everyone else's low road impossible to ignore. And NBC is rewarding that behavior. They're sending a message to every young athlete watching. This is how you build a career. This is how you create opportunities. Not by tearing others down, not by gatekeeping, not by demanding respect without earning it, but by being undeniably excellent at your craft and treating people well in the process.
The future of the WNBA is now completely unclear.
The CBA negotiations could drag on for months. The season might start late. It might not start at all. Free agency is frozen. The draft is postponed. Expansion plans are on hold. Everything is in limbo. But one thing is crystal clear. The era of the gatekeeper veteran is over. The era of bitter old guard controlling the narrative is finished. The era of making new fans feel bad for not knowing enough history has ended. The new era has already begun, and it's the era of Caitlyn Clark. She's the face of women's basketball now, whether anyone in the WNBA likes it or not. She's got the NBC platform, she's got the endorsements, she's got the audience, she's got the leverage. The veterans who tried to stop her rise didn't just fail, they created the exact opposite outcome they were trying to prevent. They made her bigger than the league itself. They made her essential while making themselves expendable. They handed her all the power while keeping none for themselves. NBC looked at the data, analyzed the behavior, watched how everyone conducted themselves over 2 years, and made a corporate decision that will define the next decade of women's basketball. They chose the future over the past. They chose growth over gatekeeping. They chose the player who makes their business more valuable over the players who make their business more difficult. And they did it in the most public way possible, putting Caitlyn Clark on their biggest basketball stage, giving her the spotlight she earned, and showing the entire sports world where their priorities lie. This isn't just a hiring decision. This is a complete restructuring of power in women's basketball. The old rules don't apply anymore. The old hierarchy has collapsed. The new queen has been crowned, and she's wearing Indiana Fever blue, sitting courtside at Madison Square Garden, analyzing NBA games for millions of viewers, while the people who tried to bully her out of relevance are sitting at home wondering how it all went so wrong. The revolution is being televised on NBC and Peacock. The veterans who tried to stop it didn't just lose the battle, they lost the war. They lost their leverage, they lost their relevance, they lost everything. And the player they tried to cancel is now the biggest star women's basketball has ever seen. The karma is poetic, the timing is perfect, the lesson is clear. When you try to dim someone else's light out of jealousy and fear, you don't hurt them. You just show the world exactly who you are. And the world has chosen accordingly.